the local government election results and the coalitions topping the agenda at the ANC's special NEC meeting over the weekend. The ANC's head of policy, monitoring and evaluation, Jeff Radebe, says the party is treating coalition talks on a case-by-case basis. He joins me in studio now for a brief chat. Mr. Radebe, thank you very much for your time. As you well aware, your premier in KZN briefing this hour, so he may interrupt us every once in a while. But let's begin with the parties that either you have called or they have called you. Who are you talking to right now?
Yeah, firstly, let me thank you for inviting us to the studio and all your viewers of Newzroom Afrika. It's the first time I come to the studios.
We appreciate your presence.
Yeah, we are talking with various political parties. Those parties started last week, but the most intensive ones were on Saturday. As the Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte said yesterday in Pretoria, that at this moment in time, we are not at liberty to divulge the details of the discussions that we are having with these parties because they have not yet been concluded. But our understanding is that during the course of this week, we will be able to indicate to the nation what status of those talks are and with whom are we talking.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what the ANC is interested in is to serve the communities for which we belong. So that service delivery must happen in South Africa throughout these municipalities.
Let me do what I would call a preemptive strike and talk about KZN because we are going to be interrupted by them. I've just had a conversation with the IFP leader, Mr. Velenkosini Hlabisa, and he is very clear that unless the ANC at national level really do its utmost to convince them to work with your structures in KZN, they're not interested in talking coalitions with you in KZN specifically. Are you willing to do whatever it'll take to convince them to work with you there?
Definitely. The ANC and the IFP have a long-standing relationship. It doesn't start now. Even way back, as you can hear the history of the President Emeritus Buthelezi, that in his younger days he was a member of the Youth League of the ANC at Fort Hare. He worked very closely with our national leadership, the late President Luthuli, Oliver Tambo, as well as Nelson Mandela in particular. Even in 1994, after the New Democracy, IFP was part of the government of national unity. The association in terms of parliamentary programs in KwaZulu-Natal, all the time, they were very cordial. Even our former president, Jacob Zuma, was an MEC in an IFP government in KwaZulu-Natal. So it's nothing new. I myself personally, I have been involved in various talks with leaders of the IFP. So it will be our pleasure to sit down with them so that we can iron out whatever differences there might be. Because at the end of the day, the people of South Africa, the people of KwaZulu-Natal, deserve the government that must bring services to the communities.
You see, that very history, that very rich history you speak about is precisely what the president of the IFP says it needs to be corrected, at least some parts. And he speaks about the propaganda that has been peddled by the ANC in a long time. And I'm keen to know what it is that you've done, and what seems to have irked them more is the renaming of the Zululand, I think, district into Mzala Nxumalo. And this is the person that they fundamentally have a problem with, because he is an ANC intellectual who went and wrote a book that clearly is seen as insulting to the President Emeritus of the IFP.
Well, Pauli, as you may be well aware, it will be very inappropriate of me to disclose confidential discussions between the ANC and the IFP. All those issues will be ventilated at an appropriate forum. I can assure you that there is no issue that the ANC is not prepared to talk, so that we can be able to find some workable solutions around many issues. Because at the end of the day, as I've said repeatedly, is that we need to serve communities. The election results are indicating that the people of South Africa They want political parties to work together to serve them. So, especially the sphere of local government, what is it that any party should do except to provide water, to provide electricity to the people, to ensure that refuse collection is done in a proper manner, to clean our cities and villages. So we believe as the ANC that if all political parties can open their hearts, open their minds, so that let's just do the basic things for our people. We've started as the ANC to ensure that the councillors that are representing the ANC, they must make a pledge not only to the ANC, but to the communities to which they serve.
Yeah.
Gone are the days where party people are just appointing mayors. We are starting the process of interviewing all those candidate mayors in South Africa. And we're going to be monitoring them so that in about 3 months' time, we're going to be calling them to ensure that they deliver the services.
Well,
because the results are a very wake-up call, I must say. The people are speaking. That's why millions, even of ANC voters, didn't go to the polls, because they say, fix local government, bring us the services that we deserve. We need dignity.
Well, we are going to delve deeper into those failures, because that's what people of South Africa see them as. A failure of the ANC to deliver on those very basic services you speak about. Well, in studio, I have the ANC Head of Policy, Jeff Radebe, coming out of the special NEC meeting at the weekend. Mr. Radebe, one of the issues going into that meeting was actually dealing with your structure in KZN, whose leaders were quoted ahead of that meeting as saying that they are unwilling to work with the Democratic Alliance. Has that position changed post the special NEC meeting?
Well, our position is very clear as the ANC, that the overriding consideration is what is in the best interest of the communities. So in other words, we're going to be assessing every aspect on a case-by-case basis. So in other words, if in a particular community we realize that we need to work with X party, I won't mention parties, if it is in the best interest of that community, we will do so. But if we believe that it will not going to be advancing the objectives of creating a better life for people, we are not afraid as the ANC to be in the opposition benches, because these elections, as I was trying to allude to earlier on in my response, it's a wake-up call for the ANC so that we can do things better to visualize what Mandela wanted in 1994, a better life for the people of South Africa.
And it's interesting that the ANC appears to be waking up to this reality, that all that people really need is the delivery of basic services. Do you agree with the characterization that the outcome, the electoral outcome here, the ANC being brought under 50% nationally, is actually a referendum on your failure to deliver on basic services, but also importantly, an outright vote of no confidence as far as your inability to fight corruption?
Definitely not. It's not a vote of no confidence in the ANC. My interpretation of these election results, 46% turnout, it's a mandate to the ANC to correct the wrongs that have happened in the past. So that is why we've started that process as the ANC of renewal and rebuilding the organization, not in a theoretical manner, but in a practical way. I alluded to that, for an example, all these councillors who have been elected now, as Sihle is saying that Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma will be proclaiming today and the IEC, I think, tomorrow on the 9th. All those councillors of the ANC already have made a public pledge. This week, as members of the ANC collectives, will be interviewing all candidate mayors throughout South Africa. At the end of that process, we'll make each and every one of them to sign a contract with the ANC. Every 3 or 4 months, they must go back to communities to report as to what they have done.
Yeah.
We're not going to just be taking mayors as party apparatchiks, but we need people with experience, with the necessary education to perform the task that they've been elected to.
Where are you going to find these people, Mr. Radebe?
They are there already. I've seen, for example, where I'm deployed, as the CVs of them, they are indicative that this wake-up call has rung home in the ANC.
So these are skilled professionals you're talking about?
We need those with skills in terms of tertiary education, as well as the necessary experience to ensure that it accommodates if there is a shortfall.
I don't need to remind you of what happened in 2016 when the ANC at national level attempted to, what was termed at that time, to parachute Togo Didiza to Tshwane because the structures in Tshwane were at loggerheads about one or other candidate that they wanted for the position of mayor. How are you going to deal with that challenge?
That challenge is not here at this present moment in time, because this process of getting those candidate mayors right now came from the communities themselves. Even the councillors, for your information, Koli, did not only come from the branches of the ANC. There were community meetings where communities voted for ANC councillors. So we believe, therefore, that this change of attitude, not in a theoretical manner, but practically, will bring back all those millions of ANC voters who stayed away. Just to underline that point, that this is not a vote of no confidence, because if it was a vote of no confidence, those millions of ANC supporters would have voted for other political parties. But they chose not to. They just stayed away.
You talk about ANC councillors who are going to be signing a pledge soon.
They've signed it already. They've made that pledge. They're going to be signing contracts with the ANC.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even in the hung municipalities.
If you are a councillor of the ANC, that's what you're going to be doing.
Yeah. That pledge, what does it say on the conduct of the councillor?
To be ethical.
Who feel that they are entitled to a particular position because they've campaigned so hard that they cannot be pipped at that particular position, and therefore they are willing to do anything, including violence, against either a fellow party member or a party or a member from another political party. What's your message as far as violence?
Our message is very clear, that those people, they don't even deserve to be called ANC members. They just hijacked membership of the organization. That's the reason where we are as the ANC in terms of these electoral results. So the National Executive Committee is very decided that we leave no stone unturned in getting rid of all the corrupt elements within the organization. Sometimes late last year, we went to some regions in Northwest. I was so shocked. Comrades complaining that some of the thugs and criminals have captured some of the branches there. So we need to cleanse the organization. The result is very clear. It's very clear that if we do not change, our people are not going to be voting for the ANC. And we are politically aware, and we are, in terms of discipline now as the National Executive Committee, committed to doing what is right. Those that are breaking the law enforcement must take its course.
And that's the message of the ANC
Yes.
to those who are going to want to perpetrate violence. The observation by those who watch politics, they are saying that if this coalition negotiation or negotiating period is not handled properly, it might actually result in violence in some instances. Are there specific rules that you have put in place? Are there specific measures that have been put in place? For example, even at the level of the police, you sit with your fellow comrade Begicele in the NEC of the ANC. What measures are there? Because if it does turn violent, it could be quite ugly.
Well, I do not have information right now that there is a possibility of violence, but If that happens, law enforcement must take over, because the rule of law must always reign supreme in South Africa. We can't allow people using extra judicial measures to resolve political differences. As I said, even a person who thinks like that does not even know the pledge that he signs in joining the African National Congress. We are not the organization that was formed for personal aggrandizement. We were formed to liberate the people of South Africa. We were formed to ensure that the freedoms that Luthuli, Dube, and all others fought and died for are attained in South Africa. So we cannot, as I'm saying, as the NEC now, allow that situation to persist where we seem to be seen as not acting when illegal things are taking place.
Has the outcome of this election, Mr. Radebe, sparked a succession debate in the ANC?
No. We're not talking about that. We're talking about fixing of the organization right now. That's why in the next meeting of the National Executive Committee, there'll be just one major agenda: the assessment of the election result and the state of the organization. So gone are the days that will be softy on these issues, because, as I said, I keep on saying it's a wake-up call, this election result, but to me, I regard it as a mandate for the ANC to do better the vision of creating a better life for South Africa.
Let me substantiate. Let me motivate why I'm asking you this question about the electoral outcome sparking a succession debate in the ANC. You have the head of the ANC presidency, Sibongile Besane, tweeting at the weekend, and his words were on Twitter that they are going to defend the leadership against people like Carl Niehaus. That as much as this electoral outcome was a lackluster result for the ANC, but they're not going to stand for the politics that are being played on the side by Carl Niehaus. Then the former president, Jacob Zuma, apparently talking at a funeral of a family member, and quoted as saying in the Sunday Times, the only resolution they are keen on implementing is the step aside. Other resolutions which are critical in the lives of people and transforming the country are being neglected. I will not keep quiet if things go wrong in the ANC. Is that not succession debate in your opinion?
No, it's not succession debate. I think it's a fair comment what the president is saying, that I think the facts are there for everybody to see, that not all resolutions of the ANC are being implemented, which is the reason why, for an example, even this outcome of this election shows that if we are to do simple things of providing water to our people, would not be in a position where we are as the ANC right now. But that is not the time now to debate about that, because as I've said, in the next meeting of the NEC, which will take about 3 days, we'll be ventilating on all those issues so that we come up with a set of measures to correct all that has gone wrong within the organization.
How much of this electoral outcome is a reflection on either the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa as an individual, given that he was the face of the campaign, and perhaps a reflection on the current leadership of the ANC?
Well, I can't say that we need to blame one person when there is a defect in what has happened right now, because the trend actually over the years, we see that at a national level and provincial level, sometimes the electoral outcome is much higher than that at a local level. So there are many factors that we have to consider when we are assessing the outcome of the election result. The state of the economy, for an example, the issue of the COVID-19 pandemic, the issue of electricity, the inability of Eskom to provide electricity to various communities, even the issue of the choice of a Monday for the date of election also has an impact. So we need to be very holistic when we're analyzing these matters, not just to identify one issue in exclusion of all others.
All right, and I like what you are pointing out there, that this has to do with the performance of the economy when you look broadly into what needs to happen now. We're going to pick up on that point because there are those who are concerned that this electoral outcome has a direct impact on President Cyril Ramaphosa staying on as president. Might there be instability, and that has a trickle-down effect on the economy. We're probably going to also look at your role as one of those who are the investment attractors to the country, if I were to put it that way. But we're going to pick up on those points when we return. We are in conversation with the ANC head of policy, Jeff Radebe, coming out of a special NEC meeting that was held in Tshwane yesterday. You're watching Newsfeed AM. We are talking to the head of the ANC leader, and he's the head of policy in that organization. And he also is leading a team of negotiators of the ANC in trying to cobble up what you would call minority governments in these hung municipalities, over 60 of them, and the majority were in the hands of the ANC. Jeff Radebe talking to me right now. Mr. Radebe, let's pick up on the issue of whether or not the job of the president is safe. There already is disquiet, as we've already dealt with a little earlier. You were not so long ago appointed alongside others as special envoys to drive investment, particularly in the energy sector. Before we get into energy matters, which are quite relevant, let's deal with, if you still do play that role, what are you saying to investors who are possibly worried about stability in the country as a direct result of this electoral outcome, which may impact on the job of the president?
Well, I think let's put that into context. When the president became the head of state in 2018, one of the first steps that he took was to set an ambitious program of bringing in $100 billion of investment into the South African economy in the next 5 years. So there were first investment envoys that were appointed in 2018, such as Trevor Manuel, Zebisi Jonas, Yakomare, and others. Derek Hanekom and myself were appointed late in 2019. So the issue of the downturn in the economy is very bad indeed. If you see the figures of 2020, that we had the worst economic performance in decades, mostly as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, where the whole world was literally on shutdown. So we need to take that into consideration. But despite that, late last year when the president convened the investment conference here in Sandton, there was a lot of interest and commitments that were made by various businesses around the world. So we're very optimistic that those commitments that have been made, together with the plan that the government has developed, the economic reconstruction and recovery plan that is being implemented now, will bring the results that we require. But unfortunately for this year, we couldn't be able to convene that investment conference because of the lockdown. But early next year, after the State of the Nation address, that investment conference will be convened. So all the details of what the pledges are will be communicated.
How difficult a job is it going to be to convince those very investors who made the pledges? Let's put emphasis on pledges, because these have to be monetized at some point. So from pledges to real money. How difficult a job is that with our current energy situation? Eskom is a mess.
Yeah, it's a major challenge, this issue of energy security, as you may well imagine. Even the mood of South Africans is actually heavily affected by the issue of the inability of Eskom to provide energy. If you have seen social media in the past 2 weeks, where even some people from Eskom saying that no, there'll be load shedding, but on voting day there'll be no load shedding. as if the other days are unimportant to people. So even some of those statements, I think they do not create a positive mood in South Africa.
Are you confident as things stand? Are you comfortable that the team at Eskom have things under control?
Well, I'm not so certain. We hear commitments, but I think the good or bad of the pudding is in the eating. So I think we need to be a little bit more patient, even though I'm also the victim of load shedding myself. I get angry when there is load shedding. But the plans that Eskom put, I think, if properly implemented, can bring us the results. But more importantly, the initiatives of the Department of Energy of bringing in more independent power producers onto the grid are the ones that are going to be able to assist us in going forward. But there are some delays. For an example, those announcements about Powership and so on and so on. But I'm very optimistic. Even the outcomes of the COP26 meeting in Glasgow indicates that South Africa also is going to be beneficiaries of large amounts of money for energy, clean energy, by the way.
Mr. Radebe, talking about Eskom, as we all know, it was one of the sites of state capture. Recently, I had the opportunity to actually ask the President whether state capture indeed has been dealt with, and I don't want to speak for the President because I actually have the soundbite from this was actually on voting day, and these were the words of the President on that day around state capture. Let's just first have a listen.
In the end, the people of South Africa can see that we are turning things around. State capture has been stopped. And whoever thinks that state capture has not been stopped must really think again. Because we had state capture for a number of years. We have stopped it in its tracks.
I know you can't exactly disagree with your party boss, but is state capture a thing of the past, in your view, as the President put it? It has been dealt with. And is it perhaps time to also kiss and make up with some of the companies, global companies, that allegedly enabled state capture? Is it time to welcome them back into the country, you think?
Well, there must also be justice. I don't think we should kiss and forget about people who have destroyed our country. So there must be justice as well. So state capture, I think, happens in many areas, but I think the President was referring specifically to the issues around Eskom, if I understand it well, but also we need to wait for the outcomes of the Zondo Commission so that we can see the extent to which things went bad in South Africa. But I'm optimistic about the future, that the future is going to be bright in South Africa. We need just to work together as South Africans. We need to correct, as the ANC, the wrongs that are happening, especially at a government level, so that the people must get the services that they deserve.
Mr. Radebe, you speak very strongly on the issue of corruption in the country, and so are many other ANC leaders, including the President. But do you think that whistleblowers have enjoyed the protection of this government, given the job that they've done for this country, the patriotism they've showed for this country? Do you think there has been justice, there has been assistance towards them, given the amount of information that they have had to let out at the detriment of their own lives?
I don't have specific statistics on that issue specifically, but my perception by reading the newspapers, reports in the media, it looks like the whistleblowers have not been dealt appropriately. But I do understand through the Department of Justice that there are measures that are being done in order to ensure that whistleblowers are protected properly. And also resources are being deployed in the Department of Justice and all its agencies to protect whistleblowers, because most of these crimes that are happening in South Africa, they don't happen in daylight, figuratively speaking. They happen in dark corners. So we need those people who hear the whispers to go to law enforcement agencies to report without any fear of reprisals.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that at least one whistleblower, we're waking up today to the news, sad news, that Ethel Williams, one of the whistleblowers, who actually even went to State Capture Commission to testify there, he says he's had to come to the difficult decision to leave the country hurriedly because his life is not safe. And this is partly why he has had to leave. And I just want to take you back to an interview we had with him in September on his latest concerns around what is now the narrative that state capture has been dealt with. Let's just have a listen to what Ethel Williams told us then.
Bain met numerous times with former President Jacob Zuma behind closed doors after hours, discussing wide-ranging plans to restructure sectors of our economy, sectors of our government, and public institutions. One of the implementations of these plans was then for Bain to work with Tom Moyane before either of them got to SARS. As you recall, Tom Moyane became the commissioner of SARS in 2014. But even before Tom Moyane got to SARS, Bain and Tom Moyane planned the restructuring of SARS as part of this broader plan with former President Jacob Zuma. So that when Moyane and Bain got to SARS, the restructuring was already a foregone conclusion. And as we know, that restructuring of SARS caused major damage to the organization, such that they were unable to collect the tax revenue for our country that was required. So this is my concern and the reason I'm speaking out. After having been so vocal about why they suspended Bain, BLSA has now let Bain in quietly through the back door. No public statements, no announcements, just quietly let them back in. How do I know this? Well, two simple facts. In fact, three simple facts. One, on BLSA's website, up until June of this year, they had Bain's logo with the word suspended above it. That word suspended is now removed. Secondly, earlier this month, in fact, there was a Business Day article in which the journalist asked BLSA about Bain's suspension, and so the CEO of BLSA, Busi Mavuso, confirmed that Bain's suspension has been lifted. And thirdly, just from my discussions with the CEO of Business Leadership South Africa, that suspension has been lifted. So it's absolutely clear the suspension has been lifted very quietly.
Mr. Radebe, Bain and Company was accused of assisting in hollowing out SARS. As you hear from Mr. Williams there, who has had to leave South Africa hurriedly, that very company has now been let back into the country quietly and is part and parcel of the companies that are under the fold, Business Leadership South Africa. Have we really dealt with state capture?
Well, I'm not familiar with the details of what Mr. Williams is talking about, but it's very concerning what he is saying. I'm not saying that I doubt what he's saying, but I'm really very, 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 very surprised about the developments. One would not have expected things to turn out like that.
Should this company be allowed to still work in South Africa or do work in South Africa, Bain and Company?
Well, from what I've heard previously, what they've done, that's why I was saying that there has to be justice to many people or entities that are involved in this phenomenon called the state capture. Sometimes I get the feeling that when people talk about state capture, they just focus on government employees and forget the real people who cause corruption, because there's always two to tango. The economic interest of companies and so on is not that prominent when people are talking about state capture.
And I couldn't agree.
That's why what Williams is talking about is very concerning.
I couldn't agree with you more when you say the focus on corruption half the time is skewed against government. It is said that it's government, and we forget the private sector. Do you think the leadership at Business Leadership South Africa needs to come out and clear this matter?
Definitely.
This man has had to be forced to leave South Africa hurriedly because he fears for his life. On the other hand, you have a company that allegedly assisted in corrupting one of the key institutions of this country, SARS. That leadership, do you think that they have at least the decency to explain to South Africans what actually is going on?
No, I think the people of South Africa deserve an explanation from that business organization, not only about paying, but where they stand on these matters of state capture and corruption. Because if they can do one thing like this, how many other things are being hidden from the public?
Mr. Radebe, we are going to conclude our conversation with hopefully one of the other initiatives you have been involved in. You were recently sent to Eswatini by the President in his capacity as leader of the SADC Troika. We're going to hear from Mr. Radebe what he saw Eswatini. We'll continue the conversation in a bit. You're watching Newsfeed AM. We are talking to the ANC head of policy, Jeff Radebe, and we discussing a whole number of issues. And now we're going to delve into the issue of Eswatini, Mr. Radebe. You were recently sent to Eswatini as part of a SADC delegation under the leadership of President Cyril Ramaphosa in his capacity as head of the SADC Troika. Firstly, what were your observations when you got to Eswatini? How is the situation in Eswatini?
Well, first of all, our visit as envoys, together with the Deputy Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Candidate Mashiko Dlamini, and representative from Botswana and Namibia, is a sequel to a technical task team that was sent by our president, the former president of the president of Botswana, who at that time was the head of the SADC organ of politics, security and defense, Ndade Masisi, His Excellency Masisi. So they had a visit in Eswatini in July, and then as a sequel to that, the current chair of the SADC Troika, our president, then sent us for a follow-up discussion. We had meetings with His Majesty the King. We also met with the members of the diplomatic corps that are accredited to Eswatini. We also met with the cabinet led by the Prime Minister, as well as stakeholders Eswatini. So the long and short of it, the issues are very difficult at the moment in Eswatini, which is indicated by the death of many people, the closure of schools, and so on, the disruption of transport networks and so on. So that's why the SADC leadership felt that there has to be an inclusive national dialogue. So I'm happy to indicate that it does appear from the statement from the presidency on behalf of President Ramaphosa, who also recently went there a few days ago, that the issues are now back on track.
Yeah. When you say you spoke to other stakeholders, apart from the King and apart from the government that is led by the Prime Minister, who are these other stakeholders you spoke to?
These are civil society organizations, this is your religious leaders, these are opinion makers. In fact, all the civil society organization of Eswatini were there. They were there in their numbers, I must say.
The intractable issue, what are the sticking points?
Well, the issues have to be ventilated in this inclusive national dialogue so that they can be able to respond to all those matters. So as envoys, we don't enter into the terrain of giving an opinion as to what is happening, but at the end of the day, we want peace and stability in Eswatini. Those are our neighbors. When they sneeze, we also catch a cold here in South Africa. So that's why it's so vitally important that there has to be political solutions, not to resort to violence in resolving political differences.
Was there an express agreement from stakeholders outside of government, outside of the Royal House, that they are willing to participate in that process?
Yes, in fact, the stakeholders, as well as the diplomatic corps, and even the government, they are now agreeing that this inclusive national dialogue has to take place.
It's a tough one, because the people of Eswatini have even marched to the officers here in South Africa to say, we are suffering under a dictatorship in Swaziland, and yet your leaders who are now in government in South Africa used to take refuge in our country. It is your time to return the favor. Have we failed the people of Eswatini to some extent?
No, we have not failed the people of Eswatini. As I've said, now even the SADC will be involved in terms of facilitation, even developing the terms of reference in order to resolve the differences that are pertaining at the Kingdom of Eswatini. So I think we have to be a little bit patient, even though things are very difficult. I don't want to underestimate that, but I believe that now there's a solution in sight, because this forum is an appropriate forum to ventilate all those issues, so that at the end of the day, the people of Eswatini themselves must resolve the issues.
All right. As we conclude our conversation, let's end it appropriately with matters affecting us here back home. You are the head of policy in the ANC. There seems to be complaints that there has not been the National General Council, which is the midterm conference of the ANC, before it goes to an elective conference. There is doubt about whether there might be a policy conference. It appears that some are concerned that all we're going to see is the ANC going straight to an elective conference without holding any of these crucial conferences.
Let me put all these issues into context. We're supposed to hold our National General Councils in 2020. But because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we couldn't hold that. But all the discussion documents were properly developed. We have discussions on Zoom on all the discussion documents. We were supposed to hold it sometime this year, but because of the lockdown, that could not materialize. So the thinking of the National Executive Committee at the moment that probably sometime next year, we should combine both the policy conference as well as the NGC, so that before we go to the national conference in December 2022, all those processes are there. So, as I'm indicating, all the discussion documents of the NGC are there. If you want a copy, I can provide you with a copy. So there have been discussions that have taken place, actually, very robust on Zoom.
The likely date that these combined conferences might take place?
We're looking around about between April and June.
April, June next year. Yeah. So we might see the combination of the NGC in sync with the policy conference. Yeah. All right. That's where we are going to leave our discussion. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
For your time.
Pleasure, Polly, and all your viewers of Newzroom Afrika.
Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Jeff Radebe is the ANC head of policy, explaining a whole myriad of, or should I say, we've explored a number of topics, even those outside of South Africa. We thank you very much for his willingness to open up to us. Jeff Radebe, hopefully we'll talk to him sometime in the future.